guys, welcome to Tony Robbins Podcast. For some of you who've been following along, it's a welcome back, and we're glad you tuned back in and downloaded this episode. And for those of you just coming across maybe for the first time, a very warm welcome, and we hope you enjoy this first experience. I'm here with Mary B., my co-host, and we have a very special guest today. In fact, this experience today is going to be very different. If you've been following the podcast, you know that we've been dealing with peak performers in business and in life. And you may be thinking we're going to interview somebody like Siri Lindley again, who's, the world's greatest triathlete who literally didn't know how to swim when she started, or, talking leadership with 4-star General Crystal about what does it take to really lead people in the most difficult situations, or, top CEOs like Joe Gebbe, who co-founded Airbnb and took it from nothing to a multi-billion-dollar organization. All of the strategies and tactics that we try to pull out of our guests here are designed to help you not expand your business, but also expand your life. And one of the things that I've found is that people spend so much time on their business today that their business is part of their identity, a major part of it if they own a business. Oftentimes people spend more time in their business than they do with their children. They spend more time in their business than with their love of their life. And so we've tried to help people in that area, but today I want to expand the wheel of life and really talk about a subject that I think is the most important of all, and that is relationship. I really believe if you're not happy in your intimate relationship, you're not going to stay happy. Nobody on their deathbed, as we all know, says, gosh, I wish I spent more time at the office. But the feelings that we have about the love in our relationships, or lack thereof, really affects us. And so here is an extraordinary guest we have today. She's been a dear friend. And actually, we've taught together for about, what has it been, Esther, 14 years?
14 years, exactly.
14 years, that's amazing. All over the world, we've done interventions together. And of course, what I'm talking about is Esther Perel, who is just, I think, a genius in this area of understanding deep relationship, understanding the dynamics between men and women, understanding the sexual dynamic and the desire dynamic and eroticism. She's written several extraordinary books. One is called Mating in Captivity, and she now has a new book, and we're going to dive into the subject today because I love going places nobody goes. I love going to the places that are taboo because the places people don't want to talk about is where often you can have the greatest breakthroughs. So Esther, and your new book is called, what is it, the title of affairs? What is it? The State of Affairs?
The State of Affairs.
So let's start with relationship first before we dig into affairs. And tell me something, why is it today? What's different historically about relationships today? They seem to be more complex. There seems to be more drama and conflict. Is that really true? Have things really changed? In a world where people can swipe right and it's no longer about relationships, sex is a commodity. How has the world changed, and how does that affect that we deal with relationship today from what you've studied and learned with? And how many people have you dealt with? I don't want to misquote, but I know you've been in this business your entire life. And how many couples have you dealt with over time?
Probably thousands.
Yes, I figured. Sure.
It's been 34 years in my practice, but also internationally, certainly with you, at the Platinum Retreats. I think we've done it about 6 or 7 times together.
Yes.
But I start with a line that I think you and I have said differently, but very, very closely, which is that the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our relationships.
No question.
Or in reverse, that it's the quality of our relationships that ultimately will determine the quality of our lives. It doesn't matter how much you perform and how successful you are. This is where the legacy really stands. And why is it more difficult today? Look, I was thinking this week, friendship hasn't really changed that much. Sibling relationships haven't really changed that much. Your relationship with your dentist hasn't really changed that much. If there is a relationship, yes, exactly. If there is a relationship that has really transformed in a very short amount of time, it's the couple. And then, therefore, also the family. But the couple has undergone extreme makeover. From the fact that not too long ago, marriage was an economic enterprise, that it is today a romantic enterprise, that people were particularly are engaged around duty and obligation and not around romance and around self-expression or self-fulfillment, that sexuality was a primarily a woman's marital duty and that people experience sexuality primarily for procreation, to a sexuality that is now rooted in desire and in connection and it therefore is a matter of free will, to the fact that we are asking one person to give us what once an entire village used to provide, because I want my partner to still give me what traditional marriage gave me, or committed relationships, straight or gay relationships. I want commitment, I want economic support, companionship, social respectability, children, but I also want you to be my best friend, my trusted confidant, my passionate lover, my intellectual equal, my best parent, the one who inspires me at work. And we have never asked one person to fulfill so many needs and often contradictory needs.
Oh my gosh, no wonder people feel stressed, right?
I mean, do you know another enterprise that has only 2 people that has such a tall order for a party of 2?
Certainly not a business, that's for sure.
So this is those major changes. If this is before even technology has entered the bedroom, but there is not a single other enterprise that begins with such an intense dream and can unravel into such a dismal abyss. And then the fact that everybody who comes to you knows that when they want to build a business, they need to learn a number of things. They need to learn best practices. They need to read about it. They need to talk with others. But when it comes to couples, we actually know very little what goes on in the life of a couple. Couples are often quite alone. They don't know if what they experience is normal, is shared, is common. It's actually a rather shrouded environment with people who feel like they have to prove that they're doing this well and that they're perfect, but without being able to go and say, I don't know if I'm doing this right, I need help. Whereas in business, they can do it. And in their romantic lives, they don't, so they've never really studied it. There's no school for relationship, there certainly is no school for sexuality, and yet people have this idea that they're going to do this once in their 20s and it's going to last for 50 years with unabiding love and intense passion and solid commitment. And it's not happening. If Apple told you a product that failed 50% of the time, would you buy it?
Good point.
But this is what's happening to marriage.
Yes. So tell us, how is social media now affecting that? How's technology affecting it as well today?
Well, so for people who are not together, it's definitely the prime way that people meet is through, I think there's 3 things. We meet primarily online, more at this point, I think, even than face-to-face. What social media has given us, and particularly what the swiping culture has given us, is a massive amount of choice. You no longer just choose between John and Philip in the village. You have thousands of people to choose from, and you feel a level of freedom that you never had, but you also have a tyranny of uncertainty and self-doubt that you've never had. How do you know this is the one when you can have 998 others who could be just as good, if not better? And so this FOMO thing, in which we are continuously wondering, is this the one? And what does it mean, the one today? It is the one that's going to make you want to delete your apps. So there is that whole piece in terms of the meeting, just the way we meet somebody. And then when people do live together, I think everywhere you look, the same thing are being described. Once technology entered the bedroom, it began with the phone, that first it was the TV, then it was the phone, now it's a multiple set of devices. There is a lack of face-to-face. People are discussing in their relationships some of the most important issues of their lives through text. And then they are concerned that they have misunderstandings. I mean, text is not made to discuss if you're going to marry or divorce or have another child or talk truth to your mother.
It's crazy. I was with somebody just recently. Actually, a gentleman was cutting my hair, and there was a woman beside him, and she was talking about how she left a message for her boyfriend saying that they wanted to see other people. It was the first initial communication of this, and she couldn't understand why he was so upset. Have this conversation in person. It's pretty wild. What do you think is the biggest mistake that the couples make today in this new environment where they expect everything and they expect their partner to be everything, and then often find themselves disappointed by creating an impossible task that they couldn't even meet for their own partner.
Right. Look, I think that one of the strange things in our Western culture at this point is that romantic love has supplanted religion as the area where men and women seek meaning, transcendence, wholeness, and ecstasy. And so when we talk about a soulmate, we seem to have mixed up the spiritual and the relational as if they're one and the same. And this kind of perfection that we long to experience in our earthly love, it used to be sought in the divine, not on earth. So this notion that you are going to make me feel good about myself, that I am going to be happy when I wake up next to you, that I bring to my relationships a kind of consumer mentality, right? Where is my ROI, where this is not a deal that I signed up for, I'm not getting my needs met. It becomes a kind of we talk more and more about love as a kind of a permanent state of enthusiasm rather than a verb. And it's a verb. It's an action that you practice throughout your life. You fail, you do mistakes, you betray, you lie, you do all kinds of things, and then you stand up again and you continue. And that sense of resilience is not necessarily as much there. And I think the big issue for me when I think of couples today is really, I've often used that metaphor because it's so clear to me. It's like there's one thing to see couples that are not dead, and there's another thing to see couples that are alive.
Yes.
And that sense of aliveness, of vitality that we yearn for, it's something that people need to cultivate, I asked almost 100 people, do you know a couple that inspires you, that you think has a spark? Now, look at what you did. You just told me about the general, and you told me about the triathlete, and you told me about the business person. Everybody in those areas can instantly name someone that inspires them, that they would like to look to, that they would like to learn from. If you ask people if they know couples that inspire them, the vast majority can't come up with anyone, maybe one.
That's the sad state of affairs. If you want to talk state of affairs, that's probably the most
yes. It's like, what? I mean, you know so many musicians, so many business people, but when I ask you about the most difficult and the most important thing that you're doing in your life, you're telling me that you have no models?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And, people are operating like their relationship is a business, like you said. They go in and they're trying to figure out what they can get. And anybody who does that in business fails in business too. The only way you succeed in business is you become obsessed with falling in love with your customer, with your client, and you don't want to make them a satisfied customer, you want to make them a raving fan, and nothing could be more true in an intimate relationship. But to do that, you've got to constantly looking at, what am I here to give? How can I light them up? That's what people do in the beginning of a relationship. And then at some point, 7 days, 7 months, 7 years, 70 years later, they walk in and they're constantly focusing on what am I getting or not, as opposed to what can I give that'll light my partner up, and that's what lights me up. What makes that change in people? What shifts us from wanting to be the giver and pour our love into someone to sitting around expecting or evaluating what we're not getting?
So it's two-part, and I think it goes very closely to what you do as well. The first thing is, I meet you, and when people tell you, meeting the right person, they're constantly wanting to meet the right person, and I'm also often asking them, and who is the person you want to be?
Yes,
this notion that you're going to find the one that's going to fill you up, the one that's going to quieten all your inner rumblings, the one that's going to, lift you and so forth, rather than what is it that you're going to do. And so in the reverse, it's true when you work with couples, and certainly in therapy or any coaching, is that you basically tell them the day you come in here, because, people come to couples therapy generally to tell you what they know is wrong with their partner and then to say, fix it.
Put you in a position.
I have never heard a person come to couples therapy and say, I came to look at what I do, how I make messes. They come to tell you that they have an expertise on describing you the messes of the other, and they will say, I'll assist you in fixing my partner. And like you, I say, things will begin to change when you start to look at yourself, what you do, what you take responsibility for, because the minute you start to take responsibility, you will experience power and freedom. And so to turn that around is unbelievably difficult. This notion that you are responsible for my happiness, I am miserable because of you, and then I need you to change. Since you don't change, I become more angry and more resentful, and then the more resentful I become, the less you're changing, and then the less you're changing and the more resentful I become, and we are in this loop together, rather than me basically saying, what can I do here to make things better, and to do it non-contingent. I'm going to do it because I think it's the right thing to do for what I want, rather than say, I'm going to sit here, passively stew, and wait for you to be the one to change, to do this first step. And that piece of work, which I watch you do all the time, I just told you I watched a movie again, and it's just like you really... it's not just that you empower, you actually tell people there is power in responsibility.
There's no question. I mean, until you're responsible, you have no power, because responsibility is the ability to respond. As long as I'm a victim, I have no control to change things. And I think the biggest challenge is our culture, and social media has created this mindset of perfection. That, I'm going to make myself look perfect. I expect my partner to be perfect. It's all about what am I going to get instead of what I'm going to give. And if you ask me, I think that's the single biggest mistake. But I also think people are not fulfilled very often because there's conditioning that comes from the culture, conditioning that comes from your family. One of the things you said the very first time we ever taught together, I wrote it down and I've applied it so many times, is the understanding of attachment theory, but the way you delivered it is so much more clear. I think the language you used initially was, tell me how you were loved as a child and I'll tell you how you love today. Would you help us to understand what are the different relationship types that come from the way, from our conditioning, and also how does our family roles play? Because, there are people that are raised in a culture, Sage was raised in a culture where mom is very clear about this subject. Some people, Mary B, what was your family like?
Not like that. That's for sure. Esther, it's true, the first few times I've heard you teach, and this goes hand in hand with what Tony teaches, you mentioned in the documentary, people see that notion that kind of everything hinges on for tone, which is the truth will set you free and you got to get dirt honest with yourself. I feel that in this topic, in relationships, I'll speak for myself, I did absolutely grow up in one of those families that is about silence and secrecy and guilt and shame, and there's just no conversation about anything, about boyfriends, about girlfriends, heavens no. So to have this principle of, okay, model the best, who do you go to? Esther, you're exactly right. There's nothing there, so that conditioning, can you just speak more to that? Yeah. There is no school, and how do families shape us, because we're so different.
So it's interesting.
And how do we break out of that conditioning, as long as we're going to stack 20 questions on it at once?
I was trying to think in my head, I'm going to answer this part first, and which
Don't go too overwhelmed. Give us the solution now, damn it.
It's actually very interesting, because I was doing a workshop at TED this year, and I got everybody up, and I basically said to them, in a kind of a sociogram, which you've seen me do when we work with the people too, I said, if relationships were central in your family life growing up, go to the left, and if they were peripheral, go to the right. Of course, I don't know what people mean when they say that. And so I said, look, now I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Were you raised for autonomy, or were you raised for loyalty? Were you told you should count on yourself, you should rely on you, if you have an issue, what is it that you can do? Or were you raised on who can help you? Who can you ask? Were you told, the moment you could speak, state your needs, say what it is you want, use your words? Or were you told you are here to actually intuit what other people want from you? And that is a very different system. That, were you raised in terms of being loyal and having legacy towards the people, as in, or were you raised to kind of do what's right for you? In the States, people often say you should do what's right for you. You should do what you want. You should do what makes you happy. In most of the world, that statement never exists without the consequences of how it will affect those that you love. You're part of a larger embedded community, and so you don't do what you want. You do what you can, provided how it will affect the others. And we went on and on like this, and I said, where did you learn to love and how? And tell me, when you grew up, did you feel that people were protecting you, or did you feel that you had to flee for protection? And were you allowed to thrive in your family? Were you allowed to cry out loud? Were you allowed to laugh out loud? Many times you can laugh out loud, but God forbid you cry out loud, right? And were people attentive to your needs, or did you have to go and take care of them because you were the parentified child? And were you touched? Were you rocked? Were you sued? Or were you beaten? Were you invaded? Were you violated? What was the relationship to the boundaries in your family? And were you, as a child, only allowed to be seen and not to be heard? Or what was the place of the child in the family? And sexuality in your family, what was that like? Yeah. So of course, often people say it was totally not central. It was not central until you start to say, tell me something. If there was violation, or if there was invasion of boundaries, or if there was silence or secrecy, do you think that makes it not present, or do you think it makes it actually hugely present, but like an elephant in the room? And if there was infidelity, do you think that makes it not present, or do you think it actually makes it hugely central as well? And in the end, of course, there's only 5 people who can tell you that sexuality wasn't central in their family life growing up.
Well, you have that definition, you're right.
You understand? It's like they think it has to do with seeing my parents being affectionate or talking to us. No. And so now they had a whole vocabulary for thinking about, with gender, because that's a piece of the expectations all the time, relationships, sexuality, and basically the fundamental question I then say is, when you came out of your histories, when you came out of your childhoods, did you feel like you were more in need for protection, for stability, for connection, protection is probably the best way. Or did you feel that you came out more with a need for space and for freedom and for exploration and for adventure? Because we both have those needs. We all need security and adventure. We all need to be able to explore, and we need to be able to experience stability and safety. But all of us come out of our histories needing more one than the other. And we tend to partner with somebody who actually is on the other side. So I tend to say, not just tell me how you were loved and I tell you how you love, but I also say, tell me how you were loved and I'll tell you how you make love. Because your emotional history is inside your body. It's inside the physicality of your sexuality. It's experienced not just in your heart and in your mind, it's experienced in your skin. How you experience touch, how you can receive. And so now the way I began to work with this is I came up with 7 verbs, just as a way to concretize this. As a person who speaks 9 languages, I've often learned a new language by looking at what are the key verbs I need to know first in order to be able to just start to speak, to be, to go, to have, to ask, And so I applied it to relationships, to ask, to take, to receive, to share, to refuse, to imagine, and to give.
That's beautiful.
And ask yourself, in your relationship life, how comfortable are you with asking? Can you ask? Or do you feel like, you should never ask because it makes you too dependent? Or you should never ask because it makes you too subjugated? Or people won't care about what you ask because you feel invisible? Every one of these verbs is like a portal into your entire relationship profile. How do you feel about giving? Do you enjoy giving? Do you experience an exuberance in your generosity? Or do you feel that you give in order to acquit yourself of your debt? You give so that you will feel free to ask, or you give so that you won't be dependent on others and you'll always be the one to pay so that nobody else, so that you never have to rely on anyone and nobody can disappoint you. How is it about receiving? Can you receive? When somebody gives you a compliment, can you simply say, thank you, that feels really nice, you made my day? Or do you start to qualify it? Can you receive? How vulnerable do you feel when you receive? And you can apply it sexually, you can apply it simply interpersonally. How is it for you to share? Do you enjoy relying on others and sharing? Or do you find that massively threatening, scary? Who's going to be there for you? You can only rely on yourself, and you certainly need to compete all the time. And for each one of these verbs, I can come up with 20 questions that basically, if when you then sit down and you start to write your relationship to each of these verbs, to each of these relationship stances, you get pretty much a good portrait of yourself. And then the next question is, which verb are we going to practice now? Which is the one that is most in need of massaging and building muscle?
And if you have sharing, so you pick those and make it a focus for them. I love that. That's so
and
simple.
now we have, and who do you need to ask from? Who is the one person that you really should be going to ask from before we end this training? You know, and who is the person that you owe something to, that you really need to go and give without asking for anything in return? And who's the person who's been wanting to give to you, who you've been closing off to, who you've been shutting down to, who you've just given the runaround to, you know, and on like this. So it goes from the map to the identifying of what is the core resource and strength that you need to muscle, to then going and actually carrying it out and doing it.
Well, you know, you've also given a great example in the past of you talking about being a child, and as you start to leave your mother or father and, you know, to go play outside, the different reactions you could have, whether you felt like you had to come back immediately, whether you were safe to go. What I'm really digging for is, you know, when you look at people's attachments, they play such a role in how they interact in relationships. And the more we can understand ourselves and our partner, the more we can have compassion, appreciation, and love for them as opposed to judgment. And some people grow up with a very secure set of attachments. You know, I know Sage grew up in an environment where, you know, she was loved no matter what. Some people grow up in more insecure attachments. I certainly grew up in that environment where, you know, you do something or not do anything, you can have your head smashed against the wall. So it's from the very person you love. So it's very different. And some people in between. Can you explain so that people could kind of look at themselves and how that plays out, how they interact in relationships, whether they're secure in their original attachments or unsecure in between, and also how they could be able to understand and appreciate their partner more and help their partner more, because people tend to, in my experience, find somebody of almost an opposite attachment. Not always.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a lot easier if you have the two people in a secure attachment.
Let's not forget the avoidance.
Yes, thank you very much. That is foreign to me. Yes, and so let's talk about those three so the people who's listening know what the hell we're talking about here. I left that one out.
And I remember meeting Sage parents. So, you know, I'm going to give you a tiny bit in terms of the attachment maps, and then I'm going to give you the maps that I use just because they're the ones that I work with personally. So when we talk about attachments, we tend to define them in 3 or 4 major categories. There is a secure attachment, there is an ambivalent attachment, there is an insecure attachment, and there is an anxious attachment. But what they all talk about is really what is the relationship very early on in terms of your ability to be able to rely on someone who pays attention to your needs, to your distress, to your joy, to your expressions, and is able to respond to it appropriately without neglect, without overemphasis on themselves, without pretending that it is for you, but it's actually for them. You know, the secure attachment is one in which you have a kind of a fluid relationship between I feel solid, I can rely on you, I can lean on you, and I can leave you, and you won't fall apart either. And I feel very good in experiencing the anchor and the exploration, the secure base and the discoveries that I do away from you. But when we don't have that, some of us develop a very insecure sense of attachment that can be very anxious. I'm constantly checking, I'm constantly coming after you. I become the pursuer in the relationship, the one who always wants more, or who wants to be reassured, or who needs to be affirmed. And then you have the withholder, and the withholder is often described as the person who will avoid conflict or who will avoid closeness, who is afraid of being invaded, but also who has learned to not come too close so that they won't be disappointed. You see, I think that what is very important to know is that our attachment style of today is often a defense that was adaptive in the moment that we were experiencing it. If you were beaten, and if you experienced violence like I know you did, and you learned to shut down and to guard yourself and to avoid, it was adaptive. It wasn't a problem. What becomes a problem is if you do this later on with someone who actually cares for you and loves you and is tender, and you still are responding from the place where you learned this thing without realizing that you're no longer at home with your mother. And it's that is very important to see, is that often the things that we have developed, our defense mechanisms, our survival strategies, which is a better term, are often were necessary at the time, but we need to undo them now. So I began to talk about it when I looked at why understanding desire, actually. I was less studying attachment as I was studying desire. But desire, of course, is very connected to attachment. And I came up with that image from looking at children, of the kid that sits on your lap. And that kid, at some point, if all goes well in development, needs to get off the lap of the parent because they want to crawl and then run and then walk, etc., to explore, to discover, to play, to be in their own imaginary world. And then they turn back always to look to see if the adult, mommy, daddy, whoever the caregiver is still there looking at them. And if the parent or the adult says, kiddo, the world is a great place, go play, go discover, I'm here, when you're done, come back, we learn to experience security and adventure at the same time, connection and freedom, separateness and togetherness, whichever way names we give to this. What we are, Ulysses used to talk about home and travel. Every epic story knows this duality.
Yes.
But if the kid turns around and there is an adult that says, I'm lonely, I'm depressed, my partner hasn't paid any attention to me, what's so good out there? Don't we have everything we need together, you and I? Then you have three main responses. And one of the big responses is, and everyone who's done that knows that, is that in order not to lose you, I will lose a part of me. Because the message says come back without ever having to say this in words. And some of us will come back and we will forego our need for freedom and for exploration and adventure and all of that in order to secure the base. And I will learn to love in a certain way when I do that, because I will learn that love comes with extra burden, extra weight, extra responsibility, extra anxiety. Love always worries and takes responsibility for the well-being of the other. But some of us have a way of loving that makes us feel that the other person needs us with such an intensity that we can no longer hold on to ourselves when we are there taking care of the other. We lose ourselves when we attend to the other. And that's when I began to say, in relationships, you will often find one person who is more afraid to lose themselves and one person who is more afraid to lose the other. One person more afraid with the fear of abandonment, and one person more afraid with the fear of being swallowed up. The second child, by the way, doesn't come back right away because they're zesty, they have energy, they want to stay playing. But the closer they become, the more the intimacy rises, the more the emotional connection thickens, the more they disconnect from their desire. Desire is not just this, it's not in the sexual sense. The desire is the free will. It's the ability to play, to attend to oneself, to experience aliveness and vitality, which is the opposite of responsibility and worry and anxiety.
Well, mine certainly was taking care of my mother. That was the piece. What was it for you, Mary?
I think I was more getting called back lovingly from mom and dad, that made me just be like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. And how's that affected your relationships, for example?
Probably in ways that I still don't even know, but I have to say, Esther, I've been listening to, if you've not heard it yet, your podcast on Audible on Amazon, Where Should We Begin? And going through with couples, and it's just brilliant to be able to witness when I'm not involved and attached and hooked, to hear human beings innocently. You do such a beautiful job of saying where you see a couple, where you meet them right now, at first glance, there is a lot going on under the surface. And just asking those questions that take you back to, one of the most powerful ones for me that you always ask, Esther, is, where did you learn that? And that has been so powerful to me to go back, and oftentimes it's like, gosh, I guess I learned that when I was like 5.
So I've added 2 questions from there that actually I attribute to my colleague Terry Real, which is not just where did you learn that, who did this to you, or who did you see do this? Mm-hmm. When I'm dealing with people who are grandiose, who are contemptuous, who put the other one down, who are dismissive, who really don't respond to the needs of another, who have no empathy, who are constantly, you tell something and they come back and they up you because their issue is always bigger and more important, their complaint precedes yours, the whole bit. It's, or suddenly if they are violent in whatever violent way that they are, it's who did this to you? Who put you down like this? Who shrunk you like that? And who did you see do this? Then it's even more concrete than where did you learn it? Because instantly they start to remember, it's like they remember that hand that presses their head down and just basically said, you are worthless. And then they can make other people feel worthless. And by the way, while they're doing this at home, they can be utterly charming to their customers.
Crazy.
Right? So I always say to them, if you treated your partner like you treat your clients, your marriage would be doing quite well. But you're charming here and you bring the leftovers there. You treat your partner, subpar, and it is not okay. And to feel like you can just parade like this, and generally, nobody's born like that. Nobody was born on the parade. So where did you see this? Tell me the movie. And now I began to, in very detailed, way, what were the words that were being used? What was the words that, if somebody wanted to just stick it to you, what was the one thing they had to say?
Interesting. Well, tell me something, one of the first things that happened when we started working together is you brought up this amazing dynamic, and you talked about it, Mating in Captivity, which is such a great title. When you talked about the distinction of caretaking and what that does to destroy, sexual desire and drive, can you talk a little bit about why does sometimes the more people love each other, the less passion they have? It's a bizarre dynamic, and we've seen it over and over again. Can you address that? And also just address the difference between love and desire.
So go back to the dynamic that I described, right? The kid looks back, the adult calls them back, and they basically say, I forgo a part of me. I disconnect from my playfulness. I disconnect from my desire. I disconnect from my exploratory side, and I turn in order to come and take care of you. These are often people who, the more they love somebody, the more they struggle to make love to that somebody. Because to make love to someone, you have to be able to feel that they are sturdy, that they can withstand the force of your desire, that they can receive you. If you experience them as fragile and you feel like you have to parent them, you can't have sex with them. If our head is straight on our shoulders, we never want sex in the family. The minute you have a relationship where one person feels like they're the parent to the other, the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the roommate, there is no sex. Because we won't have sex in the family. There may be a lot of affection, there may be a lot of physical touch, tenderness, but it won't be erotic. In order for it to be erotic, you need to not feel that you are in a parental, familial relationship. It's just taboo. That's it. And this is one of the few universal taboos. The second part of this is that when you ask people, and that's probably the way that it's the most easy to illustrate, and it's a question I took way back when I wrote Mating. You ask people, when do you find yourself most drawn to your partner? And they will systematically tell you one of 4 answers. But the first one is, I'm drawn to my partner, which is not the same as sexually attracted. When my partner is in their element, when they're doing something they're passionate about, when they're in the studio, on the horse, on the motorcycle, on the ski slope, on stage, when they are radiant, which is a word I know you often use, because it means they're inside their own life, they're inside their passion, they don't need me. They are self-sufficient. And when they don't need me, it means I don't have to take care of them. And if I don't have to take care of them, then it means I can desire them. It's simply like that. Every woman will tell you that she knows the difference when her partner, female or male partner, wants her or needs her. If the partner needs her, she can be sweet, she can take care, but she will never be turned on. If he wants her or she wants her, she will respond from the place of somebody that is confident, desires me. The biggest turn on is confidence worldwide. No matter how it looks, the word behind it is confidence. And if I have to take care of you, I can't let go. It's, the game you play on the beach where you fall back and somebody holds you. Yeah. To have sex is to surrender. To surrender, you have to feel that you can fall on somebody and they will receive you and enjoy it. If you feel like they are scared, they are threatened, or you have to worry about them, you can't let go. Why do guys in straight couples always tell you, nothing turns me on more than to see her turned on? Because if she's turned on and she's liking it, he doesn't have to worry about being predatory. He knows she's into it. If she's into it and she's enjoying it, then we are in the realm of pleasure. We're not in the realm of violence. And why does the woman never say what turns me most is to see him turned on, but she says what turns me turn on the most is to be the turn on? Is because if she's busy with her own erotic self, then she knows she's not in the role of caretaking. She's not responsible for anybody else's well-being, and for once she can actually focus on herself. And those two things, the predatory fear for the man and the burden of responsibility and caretaking for the woman, are the things that you need to let go of. Both of them, the opposite of which are you take care of somebody. So when I say love and desire, they relate and they also conflict. What I'm saying is that love wants to contract the distance. It wants to neutralize the tensions. It wants to know the beloved. It needs absolute trust. Desire needs mystery. Desire needs an other. It needs that other person that I'm looking there, that is radiant, that is in their element, that I'm curious about, that I momentarily am once again not sure that I know them, because who is that person sitting at the piano there completely rapt, and you are drawn to that other person that is not an extension of you, that you don't feel responsible for, and now you can freely want them, desire them, be attracted to them, and reach out to them. So desire needs, I would always say that love works very hard to close the gap that then desire needs to open up again. You need to have a bridge to cross and somebody to visit on the other side. Call me into your red light district, invite me. And I need to be, and that invitation, that motion is the desire, is I want to come and see who is this person, what's in there, and that curiosity is the essential ingredient of desire. And you can't be curious when you are not safe. You need the safety, you need to feel, basically, you need to not be anxious in order to be curious. And so
you feel responsible too. I mean, it's the sense of responsibility that often kills the desire, because it brings out a different part of you. It brings out the mother or the father.
That's right.
The brother or the sister or whatever. Someone's going to take care of someone as opposed to someone that you're going to literally enter another world with and, enter a new part of yourself with. Is this why so many women, most men are surprised in seminars when I ask women, what's their greatest fantasy? And like husbands will find out their wife will say being taken by a stranger.
Of course, the bad boy.
And why the bad boy? Because the bad boy, you don't have to worry about taking care of. You don't have to worry about hurting his feelings, right?
That's right.
So you can surrender. Is that right?
Yes, completely. The bad boy takes perfectly good care of himself. Thank you.
Right. So you can be whatever you want to be, do whatever you want to do. You don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. That's it. You don't. When the bad boy, when the bad boy says, "How was it?" He wants to know how was it for you. When the other partner asks her, how was it? What he wants to know is, how was I?
Right.
And he's asking for reassurance. And if he's asking for reassurance, she will mother him. And if she mothers him, she will love him, but she won't necessarily desire him.
Wow.
How
do couples that love each other so much, because I've seen this so many times, they have so much love for each other, but they're constantly looking out for each other, constantly caretaking. How do they break out of that? What would be an exercise or an assignment you give a couple to kind of break out of that and come back to where they can find curiosity and mystery and where they're not caretaking Because it comes from such a positive intent. You see couples that have been together 20, 30 years, and most of them don't have that passion anymore. They've settled for something less. And then you find those exceptions. You know, Bunny Pro and I have a dear couple friend that just yesterday celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, and they're passionate for each other. They grab each other, love each other, make love. It's just a beautiful thing at this stage of life in their 90s, 80s, and 90s. What would be an assignment? What would be someone's listening right now going, man, I love my partner so much, but we don't have enough passion. What would be your, assignment, your approach to helping them to reignite this again?
So there's a few different things that I would do. And by the way, I think that when people say we don't have enough passion, that they tell it to you 6 months to 2 years into it. It's not necessarily 20 years. The ones who have it, and the ones who lose it often lose it very early or lose it right after the kids, when they do become family. If they have little children, I say to them, tell me something. Do you have, when you go out, a curfew? Do you always have to come home because the babysitter, because somebody, because the kids, can you find a way, even if it's every 3 months, I don't care. Can you find a way where you can go out without having to come home at a certain time? When's the last time that you felt unbounded? That you felt that you were on an adventure and you didn't have to be the responsible parents on a date night out. Okay? Just where you can, and maybe stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning. Do you know, when you do this every once in a while, you really feel young. You just do. You feel like you're not being responsible citizen. You feel like you're not accountable. You just let go. It has nothing to do with how much you drink. It just has to do with the fact that there is no curfew responsibility on you at that moment. So I highly work with people on, the day of non-responsibility. You make sure that your kiddos and your whole family and your business and everything is taken care of. Second, I say, when's the last time you actually stayed in bed in the morning, not because you had a fever? I mean, it's everything that has to do with breaking rules and with playing hooky and with being naughty, because all of those things, that playfulness, which children know. I mean, the kids who play feel great, but the kids who play and are naughty in the middle of it because they entered a place where they were not supposed to go, they feel on top of the world. There is something about breaking rules that make you feel like you are really in touch with freedom and with your free will. And that energizes people. That is erotic. That makes you feel alive and vibrant and vital. So the whole gamut of breaking rules, I look at their lives, I see places, and I say, you see that thing? I want you, that rule that you put for yourself, I want you to break it. And I go for the breaking of the rules. So that is a major piece of the work I do with them. Then the second one I often do is which is a very sweet one, but one that can really reconnect people with the playfulness, because for me to get to the passion, you have to connect to the playfulness. Take out a separate email address or a separate phone number, whatever. But what I want you to do is to have a channel that you communicate. It could totally be social media, doesn't matter, that only the two of you know, not your kids, not your secretary, nobody knows anything about this. And you're not allowed to talk about Management Inc. You're not allowed to talk about anything that has to do with the shopping and the kids and the holidays and nothing. It's just a place for the lovers. You still are lovers, and you need a place where that is protected and where you only speak to each other from that place. You can send song, music, poetry, pictures, whatever you want. You're talking to your lover. You're not talking to the mother of your children or your wife or your business partner. That segregating of the erotic becomes very, very important as well. So I like to do that with them. I think anything that breeds novelty breeds testosterone. Most of the couples who are comfortable tend to do the same old because they enjoy it. And it's really nice. There's nothing wrong with doing the same old and going back to the same places and appreciating that. But it doesn't create any edge. If you want passion, you need unknown, mystery, transcendence, imagination, curiosity. It's those parts. And that means you need to do something that you haven't done. So I want you to take your partner, you're in charge of the weekend. Nothing nothing brings us more joy than somebody who surprises us, unless we have a history of trauma. Then we don't like surprises. But otherwise, take your partner, blindfold them or not, pack their suitcase and take them, even if it's around the corner to someone else's place. If you don't have a penny, it doesn't make a difference. And don't tell them anything that's going to happen next. They're in your hands, they're in your hands. Everybody remembers as a kid walking with someone that holds your hand, and you have to close your eyes and you have to trust that they're not going to bump you into other people. It's one of the favorite games we played. So anything having to do with novelty, with surprise, with protecting an erotic space, all of those things is where people will reconnect sexually. I want you to make love with your clothes on. Most people, after they are together, first they undress, then they go into the bed, and then they start to do the deed. Many people remember that when they think about moments of passion, they think about making out, actually. They think about tearing each other's clothes off as well. But a lot of it is actually, it's everything the before, it's the uncertainty. Will it happen? Won't it happen? Where is this going? I want you to go and set the room up, create an environment, and just do everything that you don't typically do. If typically you first undress, then you go to bed, don't ever take your clothes off. Just play with the parts of you that you have completely left out. And the reason it became so clear to me is because now that I've written and worked on infidelity for all these years, everybody was talking about reconnecting with the lost parts of themselves.
And that's really what people often are looking for in a relationship, aren't they?
Yep. And so the lost parts of yourself, they are all around your house. Just go there. Don't just go for the sure bet, because it works. Because in passion, what works is a disaster. So anything having to do with novelty, with surprise, with protecting an erotic space, all of those things is where people will reconnect sexually. I want you to make love with your clothes on. Most people, after they are together, first they undress, then they go into the bed, and then they start to do the deed. Many people remember that when they think about moments of passion, they think about making out, actually. They think about tearing each other's clothes off as well. But a lot of it is actually, it's everything the before, it's the uncertainty. Will it happen? Won't it happen? Where is this going? I want you to go and set the room up, create an environment, and just do everything that you don't typically do. If typically you first undress, then you go to bed, don't ever take your clothes off. Just play with the parts of you that you have completely left out. And the reason it became so clear to me is because now that I've written and worked on infidelity for all these years, everybody was talking about reconnecting with the lost parts of themselves.
And that's really what people often are looking for in a relationship, aren't they?
Yep. And so the lost parts of yourself, they are all around your house. Just go there. Don't just go for the sure bet, because it works. Because in passion, what works is a disaster.
Well, what's ironic is, I always tell people, what makes a relationship work is things in common. It's certainty. What makes a relationship passionate is differences, different energies, different mysteries, different elements. And it's not different values, but it's those differences that make something passionate. And so that's the dynamic, as we always talk about, in the 6 human needs. I can tell you in my own life, I grew up in an environment where 4 different fathers, I didn't want to ever have a divorce. And I was so unhappy in the very beginning of the relationship, but I got my love for the children. I pretty much supplemented, and because they weren't my blood children, I was 24 years old, and I had a 17-year-old son instantly, because she was 13 years my senior, an 11-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son, and then a boy on the way. And so as they grew up and began to expand, and I can remember vividly when the kids were no longer there, it was like the love was no longer there because we were such different people. No one tells you how to pick your partner. And I can remember vividly, for my achiever friends listening, I'm on stage for what to me would have been, ecstasy at that time. It was like my biggest vision. I had 13,000 people in New York at the Continental Center, and I'm doing what I love. And, when you serve people so much love comes back to you, and I'm experiencing so much of that. And then a person came up on the stage and whispered in my ear, my company had gone public that day, and they said, your stock's worth $400 million. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then I went right back to what I was doing, which really fulfilled me. And I was high as a kite all day, more really from doing what I love than even the economics, silly as that sounds. But when I went home that night, I was depressed. And the reason was because I was adapting. I constantly changed. I became a pleaser. You know, you described that person, if you go away, you left me alone. It's like, that's what happened in my childhood. So it's like, I came home and I was so unhappy because I was being something I wasn't to try to please this person. He's a good human being, but we're so different. And I finally made the decision. I said, you know what, I'm not going to be one of those VH1 movies, you know, those TV shows, if you're old enough to remember, where they used to always have a behind the music, they'd call it. That's right, Maren. They'd be this great rock group and they hit the peak of their life and then somebody'd overdose on drugs or drive their car into a wall or something. So the toughest decision in our life was to end that relationship. And it was the best decision because it led to my Sage, my Bonnie Pearl, and we've been together 18 years and the best 18 years of my life. But most people will not make those decisions. And the way I did is I sat down and said, what do I really want? Instead of judging my partner, what do I want? And then as you and I both talk about, who do I got to become to attract that kind of person, keep that person engaged for the rest of my life? So that was my focus. But today, what happens for most people is affairs. And you've been putting some expertise in that. And I know it's your next book that's coming out right away. So tell me, I know when you go to conferences, the first question people ask you is like, what percentage of people have affairs? Tell us the percentage, but more importantly, what creates an affair today, and can they be healed?
So, just to put this in context, like it's a very strange thing to say, right? I wrote a book about affairs. I wrote a book about relationships. And in order to understand what makes good relationships, I can't just go and look at the ones that work as planned. I actually had to go and look at the ones where there is betrayal, where there is a violation of trust, where there is deception. It's from looking at those relationships that I can really glean the lessons of what makes a good relationship. It's very interesting. Instead of going to look for those who could inspire, I went to look at the inspiration from those who flunked and those who went through the crisis and then those who actually re-emerged from it. And that's when I really got a sense as to what makes a good relationship. It took me on a journey that I didn't anticipate at all. So it's through the lens of affairs, but it's really, if you read this book, it's almost, it will give you everything you need to know about being a couple that remains connected and passionate, at least for a long time. So I'm 35 years with Jack, you know, and I always say we have had many marriages, like most people these days. We've had at least 2 and maybe 3. It's just that I've done it with the same person.
That's beautiful.
You know, because we've gotten this, we've been able to constantly kind of reinvent and recreate but that's what people are doing. They're doing it through their affairs, they're doing it through a new partner, or they're doing it with the same partner. In the end, if we don't grow, if we don't change, we dry up and we die. And so in the name of that growth and that change, people will do all kinds of things. If Mating in Captivity looked at the dilemmas of desire inside the relationship, then the state of affairs looks as what happens when desire goes looking elsewhere. And I wanted to look at affairs because if I ask in your audience, if I ever come back to Date with Destiny and I look at these thousands of people and I say, how many of you have been affected by infidelity? 80% or more of the people will raise their hand. It is an experience.
They may have had it with their parents.
Yes, exactly.
Their entire psychology.
Yes.
I remember I would meet, my mother had 4 fathers. I met Jim Robbins, who adopted me, my 4th father, at Bojack's, which is like a Denny's, because my mom couldn't get out. And I was the one that had to go tell her affairs. She's not there yet. And it freaked my brain out, but I love my mother so much that I had to make it okay. But at the same time, it didn't feel okay to me at all. So I think everybody's affected by affairs to some extent, whether they realize it or not, because somewhere in their family there's been one, even if they've not been affected by one person.
That's right. You've been the child of, you've been the sibling of, you've been the lover, you've been the strayer, you've been the victim of it, you've been the friend of it who is watching. I mean, it is one of the most common experiences and one of the least understood. It is infidelity.
How common is it today in the world we live in?
Look, extraordinarily common for 2 reasons. One, because women are closing the gender gap very fast. until recently, infidelity was basically a license for men and a threat to her life for women, be it through being killed, which still can be in 9 countries today, or be it through child mortality, pregnancy, you name it. She was ruined either financially, either by reputation, either by death, by natural death. So what has really changed is that women have closed the gender gap. Give the woman a car and then we'll know what she really wants to do. And maybe she's not nearly as domesticated as everybody has wanted to make it look.
That's what they're afraid of in Saudi Arabia.
You bet. That's exactly where this image came from. And that's one reason why we would say it's rampant. And the other thing is because the definition of infidelity has been rather elastic. What do we talk about when we talk about cheating? Are we talking about just having an affair? Are we talking about porn? Are we talking about massages with happy ending? Are we talking about chat rooms? Are we talking about sugar dads? Are we talking and the definition seems to be expanding all the time. There are more and more things which we today experience and describe as being across the line. So because of those two things, infidelity is on the rise all the time. And the third reason why it is higher than we think is because everybody lies about it. Everybody lies about it. So it's very hard to have any statistics. And the way people lie about it is that men have always lied to the up, men exaggerate, and women underrepresent. Because men get boosted by talking about how many conquests they have had, whereas women get shunned and judged for it. So the women have always lied by making it less, and men have always lied by pretending it was more. Worldwide, by the way.
What tend to be the triggers for affairs today?
So I think there are 2 primary categories. There are the reasons that have to do with the relationship one is in, the feeling of neglect, the feeling of indifference, the feelings of contempt, the feelings of loneliness in particular, the feelings of sexual frustration, the feelings of deadness inside, things that really emerge from a relationship that has become either intensely conflictual or intensely estranged, which is the flip side of that, and where people basically are hungry for warmth, for care, for attention, for presence, for someone who laughs at their jokes, for someone who appreciates them, for the basics of human nourishments, which they no longer feel at home. And so typically, of course, people say, then why don't they divorce? Because it's not so simple for everybody. Because there are a lot of other considerations that happen inside a marriage or inside a committed relationship that people also feel beholden to. But there's a whole other group that I find much more interesting. And that's the notion that even in happy marriages, people cheat. So, you see, when I wrote Mating in Captivity, it would not have been interesting to write a book of people who can't stand each other and don't want to have any sex with each other. It's kind of obvious. What really was interesting to me is what you asked me before. It's all these people who would come to my workshops, to my office, to our sessions together to say, we love each other very much, we have no sex. Now that becomes interesting. How come? What happens there? And then the same thing happened around infidelity. To talk about bad marriages, bad relationships, all sorts, where people therefore stray, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? They've done this forever, but to talk about the fact that people do this, even when they come in and they say, I love my partner, I would never want to leave my partner, I'm having an affair. Now I become curious. What is that about? And so I've gone for the ones that are not so simple. It's not about pathology. It's not about narcissism or borderline issues or addiction or attachment issues. It's people who are committed, who love their partner, and who are experiencing a part of themselves in another relationship that they don't bring home. And not because they can't find it at home sometimes, but because they don't want it at home. And that became a whole new thing. And the essential line that came up over the 6 years of that is people who would say, all over the world, people would say, when they described their affair, that they felt alive. And that aliveness meant that it was an experience where they didn't feel that sense of responsibility, burden, obligation that they had to their family, which they loved, but which they didn't know how to diminish in order to connect again with their passion and their aliveness. It wasn't sex, it was desire and aliveness. And then I said, maybe sometimes when people have an affair, it's not that they want to leave the person that they are with, but they want to leave the person that they have themselves become. And it's, yes, in the present. And it's not that they want to find another partner. What they're looking for is another self. And so I began to think, when I think about affairs, it's always a dual perspective. It's a growth and expansion and self-discovery on one side, hurt, betrayal, and neglect or rejection on the other side. And it's really what it did to you and what it meant to me. At the heart of affairs, you have betrayal, and at the heart of affairs, you have longing and loss.
You know, it's
longing for the lost parts of oneself.
That makes so much sense. You know, I've always said to couples, you know, you and I both know the 6 human needs, and many of my audience knows it. The need for certainty, the need for uncertainty, variety. That's that same balance that we have between wanting something and needing something simultaneously. The need to feel significant, unique, and special. The need to feel love and connection. To be significant, you got to be special, separate. To be connected, you got to be together. And then the spiritual needs to grow and to contribute. And I always tell couples, you know, whenever I hear couples, they always say, I gave him or I gave her everything. And I always say everything except what they needed. Because if you did what they needed, then leave them. I've never heard anybody say, and maybe, I don't know, 50,000 couples or 100,000 couples I've probably dealt with over time. I've never heard somebody say, you know, I have so much certainty with him or with her that they love me, and they're always surprising me. There's just so much variety in our relationship, and I feel like the most important person on earth to them, so significant, and we have such deep love, and we're growing and contributing. I want the F out of here. You know? Nobody does that. And I think what happens is that people make judgments in these relationships, and they don't understand. I've had, without mentioning names, because I never mention names unless the person talks about it, this is pretty private, but it's a very famous person I could tell you without telling you their name, who everyone listening in just about any country would know. That's how famous. A woman, incredibly brilliant lady, a person of tremendous intelligence, a person with huge heart, a person beloved by people around the world, a person who's very successful in relationships, lots of friends, very successful financially. And this woman came to me in confidence and just said, I hate myself because she said, I'm having this affair. It's been going on forever, but I can't break it off. And what's wrong? And what you always find out, I always tell people, I say, just look at these 6 needs and measure them 0 to 10. I said, tell me about your husband. You know, let's look at the first need of certainty. How certain are you he loves him? 0 to 10. And she'll say, oh, a total 10. He totally loves me. I love him. And then I'd say, okay, how about variety? And you'll see this drop off almost always, like, well, not a lot of surprises, 0 to 10, you know, maybe 3, and they really mean a 2, you know. And then I'll say, well, tell me about, you know, how significant does this person make you feel? And they say, today, I just don't feel significant with them. I'd say, you know, -1. And then I'll say, how about, you know, the idea that this person that, you know, you have this deep love. And almost always with that person, the person that they're married to, they'll say, oh my God, I have such a deep love for this person. So they have certainty and love met by that person. Growth, not so much, contribution a little bit. And I'll say, tell me about your family. And then they light up like a Christmas tree. And I'll say, oh my God. And I'll say, how certain are you that they love you and be with you forever? And they go, 0 to 10. They go, 6. You know, that uncertain. And I'll go, how about variety? Oh my God, a 20. I mean, I can't stop thinking about them. They're surprising me. They do this, they do that. How significant they make you feel? Oh my God, like the most important person was constantly thinking about me, sharing it. Love you. Well, yeah, I know he loves me, you know. So what I almost always find is people split up sometimes, and they're trying to meet some of their needs to their partners you've described, those stability type ones, and then they meet some of their other needs to somebody else, but it violates their own values. Like this woman, honesty is who she is, and she's just tearing herself up, and I try to explain to people will violate even their own values to meet their needs. If you think you're going to lose love, and love is the thing you value most, people will lie, even though they're not a liar and they feel bad about it. And so I think it's really important for people listening to understand that we create these triggers in each other, and that if you really understand your partner's needs and can fill your partner's needs, and you can make sure you're fitting all of them, the variety, the significance ones, that's when your personal relationship, your intimate relationship can feel like an affair. You know, my wife has so many personalities, I feel like I've had multiple affairs. She shows up in so many different ways. But tell me, how do you heal it? A lot of people think, you know, today, you said something in one of your talks that I saw where you said, the new shame is staying. Comment on that. You know, what is keeping people from healing these things and developing a new level of relationship? What is it in our culture that's doing that? And how do you heal a relationship if it can be healed from an affair?
So, I mean, first of all, everything you just said is music to my ears. I mean, we speak, I'm reminded of how close our view and our language is. You know, you have your vocabulary, but it's exactly that. They split off the adventure on one side, the freedom, the novelty, the surprise, and all of that, and then the other side becomes the stability, the security, the safety, and the love. And the reason I asked the question is like, what? Because the majority of the people that I work with are not chronic cheaters. They're not philanderers. They are actually people who often have been devoted, loyal, and faithful for decades. And one day they cross a line that they never thought that they would cross. And so the question always was, for a glimmer of what? Why would people be willing to risk everything they've built, including the things they've put in place themselves, all the rules that they've put in place? Why would they transgress that to experience what? What is it that people are going for? And that surprise, that novelty, that aliveness, that transcendence, what the word, you know, you put the other words to it, is really, it's like the call of the sirens. It's just irresistible. They'll destroy everything for that. And that has so much not to do just with sex. It's way more complicated. And when people begin to understand that, they also understand that it's not always the fault of the marriage. It's not marriage who did this to you. It's also what you allowed to do to yourself inside your marriage and what happened between you and your partner. So the things that help people recover from an affair, and there's multiple affairs and not every one of them can be recovered from. Let's be really clear about that. But the first thing is this: no matter what it meant for me, no matter how important it did hurt you, and it was a violation of an agreement that we had. We're talking about affairs, we're not talking about open or non-monogamy. We're talking about people who went and did something in secret. And for that, I need to be able to acknowledge that I hurt you. So the first thing when people know from any history of trauma is the acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. I know I hurt you. This was a hurtful thing to do. That acknowledgement, the remorse and the guilt that comes for that. Even if I don't feel guilty about the affair itself, even if I find complete justification and entitlement in my affair. An affair is always a plot of entitlement. Ultimately, it's something I did for myself. It is selfish. This is a given. And people are selfish in their relationships in all kinds of ways, not just by having affairs for that matter. So the first thing is my acknowledgement, the guilt, the remorse. The second one is my then proving to you how much I want to stay with you. And that means that I give you back your value, because in an affair, basically, you've been devalued, you've been replaced by someone else. And that making you, the trust is not the trust that I won't do it again. The trust is the trust that I love you and I want to be with you. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions that often people have. It's like, how can I trust him or her? To what? To not think about the other person, to not call, to not do it again. So what if they don't do it again, but they stay cold like like an ice block? That's useless. You want the person to be back with you, to claim you again, like they did in the beginning. And this is why sometimes people will tell you in the aftermath of an affair, people are having levels of conversations at the level of depth and honesty that they haven't had in years. And sex like they haven't had in years, because they find themselves back at the beginning, because nothing is certain anymore. That's it, exactly what you described. They finally brought the edge home.
Yeah,
in a crazy way, but from that place they can start to rebuild. And so the first crisis phase is really the doer has to be responsive to the person who was hurt. And in the second phase, it's really more what it did to you and what it meant for me. And it's me understanding why you did this, how you got there. And for that, you have to really have a whole different set of questions than the typical, give me the list of all the hotels that you were at. That tells you nothing. That tells you nothing. What you really want to understand is what was that like for you, and how was it, and how is it for you to come home? And you have to feel okay to say, I love this person, I hate this person, and I love this person. I want to kick you, and I want to hold you, and I want you to get the fuck out, and I want you to kiss me. And all of these contradictory feelings are happening all at once. And at this particular moment, I feel more alive with you than I probably have felt in years, and I am in pain, but alive. And it's this mind fuck that you're in at this point. And from that place, I have to tell dozens, hundreds of people, it's totally okay to say, I will work this through because I still like you, despite the fact that you've done all of this to me, or I still want to be with you, and not to feel that the shame in staying, because the only thing today that has dignity is to leave. Leaving is not
That's crazy. It's like I watch couples do this, and I watch the friends around them saying, both men and women, just dump them, get rid of them. They've invested 10, 20, 30 years. They actually do love each other.
That's right.
But the social influence today is so different. Why?
I think it's a number of things. First of all, for many, many years, when men cheated, women had no option but to stay. This is the Hillary Clinton story, right? It says a lot of people who never forgave her for that, because she could have left. It's the fact that she chose to stay when she had the option to go. That's the new shame. And therefore, many people then they have a secret from their own friends, because they can't speak to their friends, because all they will tell them is throw the dog on the curb, kick the bitch out of the house. So it's this bizarre thing that now I have a secret from the people who should help me, about what my partner did to me. It really is a strange situation. So the first thing is, I think for many women, they had no option. And so now that there is an option, the sense is you really should go. The second thing is infidelity has become the leading cause of divorce in the West, because it's become the ultimate betrayal, because it shatters the grand ambition of love, because I thought I had found the one, and this tells me I'm not your one. I actually am replaceable. I'm not indispensable. And that shatters my identity, which it doesn't do in the traditional world at all. This is not what it's about. And this idea that it's become a bigger, in the United States, people are more judgmental of infidelity than they are of cloning, of suicide, of many other things. It's a bigger betrayal than anything else. It's very, very interesting how this has become the break of the contract. You can steal my money, you can beat me, you can do a lot of things, you can be contemptuous to me, you can be neglectful of me. None of these other betrayals, people will say, you should leave, you should leave, you should leave. This one, it's like one strike and you're out. And that needs to be...
And is that true worldwide, though? Is like, in a place like France or places of that nature, isn't there a different cultural association, or is the American culture kind of spread to the whole world now?
I think the American culture has spread. I mean, this comes with individualism as well. In France also, infidelity is a leading cause of divorce. And for all of you who think I have a French accent, I'm from the Flemish part of Belgium. I'm not French. But what is different in France is that the issue is not I leave because you cheated on me. The issue is I leave because you fell in love with someone else.
Interesting. So there's the distinction. Whenever couples go through this, my whole component is to get both to own it, because like you said, the person had the affair, I don't support that in any way, shape, or form, but at the same time, no matter how thin you slice it, there's two sides, and there's these other things that people do that make a person who look outside the relationship. They don't offer their intimacy. They don't offer love. They're not honest. They can be verbally abusive. They can be physically abusive. And yet they'll be totally outraged by this individual. And what I try to get people to do is to say it takes two to tango. And this cultural conditioning, it doesn't take humanity into it. These are human beings trying to meet their needs, and you're part of that process. Unless we can own our responsibility in it also, and I know that's not culturally PC, then couples are just going to run into the same problem again with someone else, or never have a deep, intimate relationship again. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I think totally. I mean, look, I write about affairs. That doesn't mean I condone affairs or I justify affairs. It's irrelevant. I'm trying to understand an experience that so many people go through, and we need a new conversation about it, because what's happening is insufficient. It's not helping couples, and it doesn't really allow them to tap into their resilience. It's very clear that you can say no to your partner for 12 years physically to any contact, but your partner goes out once. This is a betrayal, and the other one is not.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know, but it is also clear that there are plenty of partners who are not participant. You know, I've seen it many times. I've often said, when I see someone have an affair, I ask them, have you lost someone in the last few years?
What does that mean?
There is something about when...
About death?
No, yes, life is short. Well, you know, earthquakes, floods, 9/11, my father dies, my friend went too soon, I got bad news at the doctor. When mortality hits, people say, is this it? Is there more? And it is something about that lets them cross the line that they would never have crossed before, and it has nothing to do with their partner. And sometimes I have to say to the partner, I'm really sorry to tell you, but it has nothing to do with you. It happened to you, but you have nothing to do with this. Can you understand that? And that's no-fault affairs. People don't understand that. No-fault divorce they finally got, but no-fault affairs they still don't understand. It is this person's responsibility, and you may have some compassion for it, and ultimately you learn to understand it. He didn't do this, or she didn't do this to do something to you. He or she did this to do something for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead, Mary.
Well, no, Esther, I love how you're always constantly just expanding the definition of sex and the meaning of why someone might ever step out. I've heard you say before that people often do what they think they're allowed to do. And even just hearing the first time you taught that, when, you know, and hearing the couples interact in your podcast, it's true how sometimes where there's loss of a loved one, of a parent, or grief, that all of a sudden, in some cases, that might be the first opportunity of permission that a person feels like,
correct,
I'm now, and Tone, like how you teach, you get what you tolerate. In the same ways, it's like, to feel how someone's rules can bend in situations contextually, I think has been so important for me to learn myself, of explaining my own behavior, and in partners that I've been with, just, wow, that makes sense. That maybe had nothing to do with me, whether I'm the one doing it or on the other side. Just the motivations behind things, and it's just the questions that you both bring people to ask of themselves and of their partners. So invaluable.
What would you What would you say to someone? Mary, you shared an experience with me at one point. If you discover that someone you're in a relationship is having an affair with you, so how does somebody deal with that moment?
Say that again.
What would you recommend to someone if they discover, inadvertently, for example?
I was sharing with Tone in the age of so many digital relationships, and just with computers and laptops and phones always accessible in relationships. I have had an experience where it's like, in 1 second, your whole, a whole year of your life can unravel if you find something of your partner's, whether you meant to or not. And just the impact of that moment today, that I think is probably a pretty common experience for people, where in 1 second, oh my God, my whole life just unraveled. Because you found something else.
And I say it is absolutely gutting, because you no longer just find a little receipt in the pocket. Today you find the entire digital archive, and so it's a death by 1,000 cuts. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say. I say, oh my God, this is gutting. Do yourself a favor. Don't read every message. Don't. You won't be able to get them out of your head. Don't look at the pictures. It's like watching the towers burn after 9/11. Don't stand there and stare and freeze.
I have a dear friend who I love dearly, who his lady had an affair, his wife had an affair, and he found videos, and he watched videos, and he just destroyed. I said, why'd you do that? But it's like, you often say, like, if someone has an affair and you're trying to heal it, don't ask them all the details. Don't ask them, were they better than me? Don't ask them, where did you meet? Those questions people want to ask. Why should they not ask that? And why do people?
Or Esther, also, like, what are the questions to ask? And what are the quality questions to go to your partner when you want to just be like, what the heck?
What the heck? This is just dropping F-bombs like crazy. I don't know.
So So part of
What do you suggest? Somebody discovers this. What should they do? What should they communicate? How should they deal with it?
So the first, it's a lot of different things, and part of that is actually where the podcast comes in. The podcast was really, it's a lot of things for the podcast, but because I for the first time opened the door of couples therapy. Nobody actually knows what goes on in the antechamber of a couple's lives. That's the whole thing, and couples have, and nobody talks about this. So I wanted these conversations to become public. For a long time, the wise person sat in the center of the square, and now they're sitting in some office with closed doors. And to open those conversations again is to bring the wise person back into the village, in the middle, and have the windows open up. So what I say is, what do you know so far? What do you know? Do you know the person? Have you wondered about this? Are you surprised? Have you been suspicious? This is a bucket here, they're not in order. Have you been suspicious of this? Has there been any signs for you that you began to wonder, is something going on? Do you want to know more? When they have a question, I always say to them, do you want to know the answer to your question, or do you want your partner to know that you have the question?
That's really brilliant.
Do you understand? Because I want you to know, I'm asking myself, did she scream? Was she but I don't want to know the answer, because the answer I will stay awake months later, still churning in my head with that answer. But I want you to know where my head takes me, and it takes me to these crazy places. Like I can't recognize myself with my obsession and with my scavenging for the truth. And then I want to know, I would say, look, I completely know you want to immerse yourself in the digital archive and just spend your night there reading. I promise you, this is, you make your first question. So what you want to ask is, were you looking for this? Were you looking for this, or did this just happen and you didn't resist it? How did you justify it to yourself? What gave you the permission? Did you think about me? Did you think about how it would affect me or us? Were you afraid to lose me? Did you want me to find out? Did you hope I would never find out? Did you think about our children? Why this person? Because I think it makes a big difference if you go to the best friend or if you go to somebody that nobody knows. There are gradations here of betrayal, What was it like when you would come home? Do you think I should forgive you? Do you wish I didn't forgive you on some level? Do you want me to leave so that you don't have to make the decision? I have 150 questions on my list that I give them, and they can choose from there. But those are not the questions for day one. In day one, you have really more, you want to ask, what happened? How long has this been going on? Have you been safe? Do I have something to worry about? Is there another child? Do I know this person? Is this person likely to come after us? I saw this couple a few days ago, and the wife absolutely wants to go and meet the other woman, and he's begging her not to go. Why? Because I think he lied so much to the other woman that he would think he realizes it's monstrous. It's monstrous. For so many years he lied so much to the other person, and then he thinks the wrath of the other person is going to make her want to destroy them, which is totally understandable too. There's a reason people talk about crimes of passion, even if there's not a literal crime, And then I heard yesterday that she didn't go to see the other woman, but the other woman came to their house. And it's a devastation. This is everyday therapy. This is not like a once a week kind of thing. You're holding a system. And what you want in the beginning is not to make any decisions. Your limbic system is hijacked. You can't think. Don't make decisions. And don't confuse the feelings about the affair with the feelings about your marriage and about your life and about the fact that your whole life is a lie and is a fraud. All of these thoughts are totally normal and natural, but don't make decisions based on that. You want to be as much calm as you can. you need a container, you need a good therapist who holds this for you, who gives you reassurance, who tells you that you will get through this one way or another, together or apart, but you will. You want calm, structure, reassurance, and you want to make sure that you're safe, and if you need to leave the house for a few days, you leave the house for a few days, and you want to find one or two people that you can talk to, and who are not going to tell you what you should do, who are going to be there as friends and just listen while you figure it out, rather than project their own ideas on what you should do and how you should live your life. And that's what you're going to do for the first month or two. That's it. That's a plenty.
So tell me, the beauty of you with this podcast. Let's talk about this because we're going to be wrapping up, and I want people to have a place to get resources. One of the things that Sage and I did years ago is created an ultimate relationship program, and instead of just talking about these principles, let's take real interventions and let's show real people, raw, yes, it's happening. And I haven't seen anybody else do that before, other than now you're doing that. I'm thrilled you're doing that. And one of the things that shows up when I looked at some of these, I was struck by how often people talk about what they weren't getting, and you ask them, did you ever ask for it?
Yes.
And people, why don't we, like almost universally, people don't ask. I'm going to give you two questions. Why don't we ask, and then we've talked about this, what are the 2 or 3 things you must not do in this situation? What are the 2 or 3 most important things to do in this situation? And I'm going to lead you to the final question, which is, can real greatness come, of goodness come from healing an affair?
Yeah. So, the podcast came about because I had worked on the Showtime series The Affair, and somebody from TED.
Oh, the fictional series you're talking about.
Yes,
right?
I was a consultant on that show. And then June Cohen from TED came to me and said, we would like to do something similar in a podcast version. And I said, couples is not like that. He said, she said. In couples, actually, and it can be romantic couples, but I work with co-founder couples in companies. I mean, it's all couples. It's often what I say that I didn't mean to say, but that then makes you say the thing that you didn't really want to say either, but you think that I made you say this thing, and then I think that you set me up to do something, which then leads me to say the thing that I've been wanting to tell you for so long, but I didn't mean to say to you in those circumstances, and it goes like that in this total circular thing.
Oh my God.
Tony's laughing, but I totally relate to everything you said, so I don't know what I missed.
Oh my God.
So I said, if you want to try a podcast on that, I would love to show you what couples are really like. And I said, come on, let's do one session. We've had almost 1,000 couples apply just to be on the show. And the first season has more issues related to infidelity, sexuality, other issues. But now we are in season 2, which will be released on October 6th, and everything's going on iTunes. And, I'm doing all kinds of couplings, all kind parents. I'm going to do siblings. I'm going to do male friends. I mean, it's really is going to look at dyads. I'm going to do co-founders, and I wanted to. What happens is that when you listen to the others, you actually realize that you're standing in front of your own mirror. You think you're being a voyeur, but in fact, you're learning the language for the conversations that you may want to have yourselves.
I cannot tell you how much that has been my experience, Esther. I have to commend you and tell you, anyone who's listening too. It's so, you always say to them, especially when a couple stands up, they're usually either a warning or an example. And for me, just listening to this on Audible, Esther, you working with these couples that are, the one I listen to in particular, say that they're a year out of the affair from the infidelity.
Yeah.
And I'm listening, and like you said, okay, I might think I'm on the outside, and I'll catch myself feeling like, oh wow, I would never do that, and I should be. Or I totally do that and I shouldn't. It's just such a powerful way to witness and take with takeaways to adjust your own behavior or questions.
Right. So where should we begin is really that. It's that original audio series in which I would love for you, without having gone through the same experience, to get the universal message. Couples are, it's the company that has the most amount of expectations put onto it with the least amount of help and the biggest amount of disillusion. And I wanted to give that sense of hope. These people come in, they spend 3 hours with me, they come in with one story, they leave with another. And when you listen, I want you to be able to change your story. And like you, Tony, I often say the story describes what you go through, but it also shapes what you go through. And so people are
change your life, right?
Exactly.
That's really what it is.
Exactly. People are stuck in their story, and in every episode they come in with one story and they leave with another, and that's often about as much as you can do in 3 hours, but it inspires people all over the world around that.
It's completely life-changing, and I always tell people, divorce your story of limitation, of your pain, of being injured, of being a victim, and marry the truth that you're the creator of your life. You're not a manager of your circumstances, and you can change anything if you can own that responsibility. Address just for a moment, where do they go get this? Because I want to make sure people know where to go.
Yeah, so there's 3 different places people go these days. There is the podcast, which is Where Should We Begin, which at this moment is only on Audible. October 6th, it goes on iTunes.
Great.
There is the YouTube channel, which is a series of videos called Moments, where I do 4-minute snapshots of a lot of these topics, because not everybody wants to read a whole book. And so it's on multiple subjects related to relationships, always thinking about how I can make people have better relationships with that sense of aliveness and vitality that they want, and how can they learn it to do it. And then there is a thing which I think is very interesting for the people that are with you. It's called Sessions with Esther Perel. And basically, like you, I think that you're somebody who talks to a lot of different people, but a lot of people today are having siloed conversations. And Sessions with me is basically an educational platform for coaches, for therapists, for people who are working on relationships and who want to be in dialogue across disciplines and across cultures. So I bring the best researchers, anthropologists, therapists, coaches from everywhere who work in the field of relationships to the platform, and I interview them, and then people can have live questions and community forums with them, so that we develop a new conversation that is more truth-telling, that is less judgmental, that is more diverse about the subject of relationships. Everybody understands today that it's at the center. When I began with you and I would go talk about relationships in companies, it was the soft skills. It was the things that you brought somebody in when there was a real crisis. Nobody took it seriously. But today, everybody understands that the relationship quality is what determines the success of the company. On the inside, between the founders, when I do the co-founders work, we know that more than 50% of startups fail because of the relationships between the co-founders falls apart. And even if they had the best idea. So everything hinges on this. It's not just a romantic relationship, but the romantic couple is the one that I have spent my time studying, because it gives lessons to everybody else. People have affairs in companies today too. In the gig economy, people have affairs all the time. Where they go off on the side to have their sense of aliveness. So I have to tell everyone, I've learned an enormous amount from our collaborations together, and from the trust and the confidence that you've given me over the 14 years that we have worked together, and then just brought my own personal sauce to it,
Yes, you certainly have. I've always loved working together. Doing interventions together is one of the things I enjoy most, because there's very few people I can pitch and catch with other than my wife, and in this category, you're just such a genius. So I really thank you for that. Your book, The State of Affairs, is coming out when?
October 10.
Awesome.
In the US, October 10 for the US, October 12 for the UK, and then for the Dutch, for the French, for the Italian, for the Spanish, it's all happening as we go into 2018. But October 10 is the State of Affairs for the US.
Wonderful. I hope that people listening today, the real outcome I wanted today was to talk about something that most people it's taboo to talk about, with a person who's got more experience about how to guide people through this. And I'm hoping that people listening to us will remember now that the quality of your life is the quality of relationships and business and life, and certainly your intimate life, the most important one of all, but that it isn't something that just comes naturally, that we just all assume that it's like learning to run a business. It's not something that just happens. It's something you got to make it a study. If you want life to get better, if you want your relationship to get better, you got to get better. If you want things to change, you got to change. You've got to master these skills. And so, while I teach a whole body of knowledge in this area, you're the one other person that I have the most respect for in this area, and why I wanted to bring you on. So I hope those listening will pursue this at whatever level they want, whether it's on video or your book or all the above. But it's something you've got to dedicate time to. And it doesn't have to be because there's a problem. The ideal time to do it is when there's not a problem, so you become skilled and you never have these types of problems. But I want to finish with the most important question. We've alluded to it a little bit, but you talked recently about how, I think in your TED Talk or somewhere, I was really moved by it. You talked about, we all are aware today that we used to have one job, one career, for a lifetime. People worked for IBM forever and that was it, right? And today, people have, between 4 and 12 careers, depending upon what generation they're going to be in. Tell me, how does that relate to relationship, and what goodness, what even greatness, that sounds absurd to say to somebody today, because most people have that, the shame of staying, but what greatness can come from by staying and working it out and transforming your affair into the quality of relationship you desire and deserve?
So, I think that the question that you asked before, what have I done? What has been my contribution? How have I invested in maintaining a meaningful, passionate or alive or fun relationship with my partner? Have I done my part? Have I shown up? Have I done my part? I think everybody needs to reckon with that question. You can do it in relation to your kids or to your spouse, but at some point you ask yourself, have I put in the best of myself here?
And the answer to that question has got to be not did you give what you wanted to give, but did you give what they needed, right?
Yes.
That's the biggest challenge.
Exactly.
People say to me, I gave everything except what they needed, or they wouldn't have left you.
That's right. You gave what you wanted. And typically, we give to the other not only what we want, but we give to the other that which we want them to give to us.
Yes, it's so true.
You understand? Yes. So if I like to be left alone when I'm upset, I tend to do that for you. In fact, you are the person who really needs a hug when you're upset. We tend to do for the other that which we want them to do for us, and that is not what they want from us. So are you able to actually set yourself aside for a moment and listen and pay attention to what they ask? And can you do it gracefully? Can you actually do something for the other just because it makes them feel good? And then, like you, I would jump right away to the other person and I say, and can you receive the fact that somebody did something just because it's you, even though they would never do it if you were not there? Oh no, I want them to do this because I wanted them to want it as well. No, they don't want it. They're doing it to please you. Can you feel that important and actually take it? Rather than want them to want what you want so that you don't have to owe them anything. Right? So I think what happens today is that there is a short leash. There is a kind of I shouldn't have to deal with this. This is more than what it's worth. This shouldn't be so hard. And I'm like saying, excuse me, you're willing to work in your business that hard, but in your marriage it should come easy? No, my dear, it's not. It will not. And that means that it's not hard work. It's also creative work. It's fulfilling work. If you want to have a nice meal, you're going to go get the right wines, and you're going to go to the market, and you're going to pick your ingredients, and you're going to be artful about it. I will help you be artful about it. If you just want to do fast food, I don't know that you don't need me for that. You're doing that perfectly fine on your own. But you will look like you look, and you will feel like you feel. If you say, I want something more, you have to invest in it. And I ask, people will read books about business, people will read books about investment, people will read books about which boat to buy. But if you ask them, when's the last time you actually read a book about how to be a better lover? Whoop, nothing. And I'm like, excuse me. And you're surprised? And bring the best of you, and then we will start having it. Then we have something to talk about. And I'll help you get the best of you and put out the most of you when it comes to your relationship, so that you will not lie there and know ultimately, when you reckon with your truth, that you just did it half-assed, that you tried to get away with it, that you did the bare minimum. Because you do the bare minimum, you're going to get the bare minimum. Your children will know it, your friends will know it, and your spouse will know it. The only person who can actually leave is your spouse and your friends. Your children can't leave as easily. They may ultimately. Do better. Show up. Show up. And I've never known someone who ultimately, when they do the right thing, feels bad about it.
Yeah, no kidding.
And wishes they hadn't. There is integrity and passion. And what happens in passion, and this is a very interesting thing in affairs as well, is that while a person is lying to their partner, they often feel that they are for the first time experiencing truth with themselves. You've got these two things happening at once. It's like so I would say, stop being a pleaser, ask for what you want. And when you ask, you may have to accept a no. And you may have to accept that sometimes a person will be hurt by it. And then you will know that you really are fully invested in the relationship, that you're not just avoiding conflict. And in the end, you resent it, but you do what the other one wants, and you hope that you get your reward for having been good. Don't be good.
What good or greatness can come out of a healed affair? Tell me that, because you've dealt with somebody and seen it. Tell me what's the beauty that can come from it if people stick it out and break through.
It's your line. It's your line. What if the worst day of your life became the best day of your life? That's your line, right? It's exactly that. It's that day when you thought everything just fell apart. I mean, everything falls apart. You think, because it's one thing not to know your future and to know that the future is unpredictable, but it's another thing to suddenly question your past and to think that you can no longer rely on anything that you thought was, and you question everything. So from that place, when people really begin to heal and they rebuild, they actually become a new marriage inside this relationship. And it's not just they stay together because they don't want to split, and it's not they stay together and they never talk about it. It's they actually start to say, what can we learn from this? How are we going to turn this crisis into an opportunity? What does it tell us about the stuff that we let go by the wayside, the stuff we neglected, the laziness we took on, the complacency that became ours? And now they begin to really be intentional and diligent about it. And people will tell you, it's less when my partner cheated on me. It becomes when we had a crisis. 10 years ago we had a crisis. It becomes a we crisis, and it becomes our crisis, which we took as an opportunity to say, you know what, I really like this person, but our relationship is in dire need of a tune-up or a complete new piece. And we worked on this and turned it around. We became attentive to each other in ways we had never been. We changed the power dynamic. We changed the financial issues. We changed the sexual relationship. We started to listen to each other in a whole different way. We showed up for each other. And from that place, they tell you, this was the worst thing that happened to us, but it just took us to a place where our relationship is better than it ever was before. That's what they tell you.
That's beautiful. And that can only happen if it's not moralistic, it's not judgment, because you can't influence anyone, you can't understand anyone, you can't appreciate anyone while you're judging them. And the ability to take that responsibility and to dig into all our sides, I think is the most beautiful thing that you teach, because without that, you have nothing but lies. You have lies to yourself, thinking that it's all someone else, everything. I always tell people, you want to change another person, change yourself. Because we're all in a cybernetic group.
Absolutely.
If I come to you the same way every time, you're going to predictably come back to me. But if I can respond in completely different ways, that's the power. It's not changing your partner, it's changing yourself. And I think if we can understand each other, appreciate each other, dig underneath each other, stop the blame, and say, listen, what's my part? What's our part? And I love this we crisis. Boy, that is beautiful. And those couples, I've met them too, their relationships are stronger. It's the old, burnt out metaphor, but it's been said so many times because it's true. It's like a part of your body. When the bone breaks, where it heals becomes one of the strongest bones in the body. The same thing happens with the relationship with its nature. And I'm so glad that you are doing this work and putting out your book and giving people this vision, because too many people are hurting too deeply, and they're looking outside themselves for coaching from people that also don't know how to find the answer. It's like I always tell people, you don't want to go to a doctor that's ill, somebody that smokes, somebody's broken up, tell you what to do, or go to a psychiatrist that's, on Prozac, and people do it all the time, or go to somebody who's, broke financially, but they're giving you financial advice. It's like, this is the beauty. You've really studied the best patterns out there, and you've brought the truth to people, and the truth can set everyone free. So I hope people are inspired by this session. I'm excited to see you. We're going to see you again in Maui here with our platinum partners in October, so I'm looking forward to that again.
Yes.
As we're going to leave, is there anything you've not shared that you want to leave as a final note? Because I know I got you on your airplane here. I think I've taken you over your time. I don't want you to miss your flight.
So I'll add two things that are important in this remake, but it's all in the book as well, is this. When you ask a question, don't go for the sordid details. Don't ask the detective questions. Ask the investigative questions. Ask the ones that help you understand who your partner is and what this will represent for the two of you. That separation is so crucial. It doesn't matter how many orgasms the other person had, or if the scarf cost her 300. It's bad. That's it. It will be worse than what you thought anyway. Don't worry about that. So I can tell you, and no matter what you ask, there is more. There is more that you will never know, always. Trust is a leap of faith. Trust is an active engagement with the unknown. This is what happens when you meet a partner in the beginning, and this is what happens when you rebuild a relationship after an affair. You trust as an active engagement with the unknown. That's a Rachel Botsman quote, a great woman who talks about trust. And the second thing is, and now I forgot what the next thing was going to be.
I'll plant a seed while you're thinking. I always tell people there's two forces, fear and faith. What's the difference? They're both imagination, because nobody knows what the future is going to really hold in any situation, right? You can do everything right, and the person you love could die, you could be caught in an accident, you could be killed, you could have cancer. But the difference between fear and faith is they're both imagination, but fear is imagination undirected, where you let the environment run you. It's like weeds, it grows automatically. Faith is deciding to be certain, even though there's no evidence. And we're born with faith. It's not a learned skill. You can learn it as well, but I always tell people, how do you drive down a freeway, or not even a freeway, how about a road where there's nothing but a yellow dyed line to divide you from crazies that are going at you at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and every single day people get killed. Every single day somebody falls asleep or they're drunk and they come across the line. So how do you leave the house? Because you were born with faith, because without faith, there is no future. Without faith, you'll never have what you desire. Without faith, you'll never be able to create anything. And creating faith in the middle of uncertainty is what leaders do. And people that listen to this type of podcasts are those types of individuals. So I'm calling to them, saying, bring the certainty that you use in sports, or use in business, or use to lead, or use with your children. Bring that to this situation, and you can make it stronger than it's ever been before. But if you allow fear to dominate you instead of faith, then there's nothing that's going to make anything last in your life long term. You'll just leave this relationship only to find yourself in a new bag of challenges in the next one, or finding yourself alone because you're afraid to re-engage.
Beautifully said. And I love our conversations, and I want to continue the conversation with all of the people that are listening to us here today, and that means you find me on all the social channels as well. I think that this is a time in the world where listening has become crucial, because people are not listening to each other nearly enough, and everybody's talking pretty much in echo chambers. And listening to your partner at a time when things are the most polarized is your biggest challenge. But when you can do that, you have really demonstrated your ability to enter into the shoes of another person. And there is nothing bigger to expand yourself than the ability to also be able to stop thinking about yourself for a minute. It's kind of the both end. You want to be able to tap into yourself, and you also on occasion just want to, when somebody tells you something, don't answer, just ask another question. Just be curious for a minute. It'll make you more humble, and it'll help you with the fear of the unknown and the uncertain. It's I couldn't have said it better. So it's a treat. We'll be in Maui together, maybe via screen this time, but we'll still be there. And I would love to continue this conversation with everybody involved in every of the mediums that the world is affording us these days.
I'm sure they will, and I'm really grateful we've had this conversation. I hope everyone listening really thinks about a relationship is not a place to go get, it's a place to go give. Certainly you want to receive there also, but if your focus is on giving, you will be lit up. What we give, we get to experience. What we hold back is what destroys any relationship. And holding back love is the worst thing you can do to yourself. When you think you're punishing someone else, you're really just punishing yourself. And I think that's the biggest mistake in relationships. And if we can reconnect to the heart of the giver inside of us, then we become more lovable because we are nothing but love. And it's really hard when it's real, unconditional love for anyone to turn their back on it. So your greatest gift, your greatest strength, and your greatest protection from the pain you fear is to go deeper into the love and giving instead of pulling back and evaluating and limiting and making it a transaction. What were you about to say?
You know how I was good? No, it makes me think of a line that I sometimes say to my couples. I say, your partner never belongs to you. At best, he or she is on loan with an option to renew.
So make yourself worthy of renewal, for God's sakes.
Exactly.
Esther, we love you dearly. Thank you for taking the time with us. Enjoy your flight. We'll see you. We'll be talking to you in October in Maui with a Platts.
Wonderful. Big kiss to both of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Tony Robbins Podcast is directed and hosted by Tony Robbins and Mary Buckheit. Carrie Song is our executive producer. Strategy and distribution by Anna Yorg and Tyler Culbertson. Jamie Carvajal and Adriel De La Torre are our digital editors. Copyright Robbins Research International.
Thank you.